What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another Too Good for Theaters video. Today, we're going to be breaking down the Patriots season opener, unfortunately on the wrong side of a 20-13 loss versus the Las Vegas Raiders, so let's get right into this breakdown. This really was a tale of two halves for the Patriots, specifically on offense. After a quick 3-and-out, I felt like the Patriots came out and they were playing more in sync. They were taking advantage of some of the Raiders' miscues, especially in their weakened and depleted secondary. Certainly not a strength, you would say, for the Raiders. And I felt like Josh McDaniels had a pretty good game plan coming in of getting some of the guys involved. Of course, we saw a lot of Kayshon Boutte on the day, which is very encouraging. I believe he actually had over 100 receiving yards, which is very nice. We have had very few of those here in New England over the past couple years. And we saw Stephon Diggs get more and more integrated into the game as the game went on. Him and Drake May were able to link up on some passes, but it really was, like I said before, a tale of two halves for this Patriots offense, and particularly Drake May. Starting off in the first half, of course, had that poor overthrow of Demario Douglas on the first drive, but after that, I felt like Josh McDaniels did a really nice job in terms of play calling, in terms of getting the ball spread around to different positional groups, whether it was wide receivers, guys like Kayshon Boutte and Stephon Diggs, eventually more towards the end of the game, as well as the tight ends, especially early on. Austin Hooper had a nice 10-yard catch. Hunter Henry had a pair of 10-plus yard catches early on. And it really looked like Drake May was getting into a rhythm here with the play calling. However, it was very one-dimensional, where the Patriots really struggled to kind of get the run game involved. And it was interesting. The only real time that I saw the Patriots have a little bit of minor success in the run game was either RPOs or even QB options. And that's something that we haven't seen from Josh McDaniels, of course, here in New England, except for the time where he played with Cam Newton. So we're going to see those. I expect to see those more regularly in this Drake May-led offense compared to the quote-unquote conventional Josh McDaniels system that we expect here in New England, of course, because he had Tom Brady. But in terms of running through the tackles today, the Patriots just did not have any success. In the middle of the Raiders' defensive line, as well as Max Crosby, really dominated the line of scrimmage and made this Patriots team a very one-dimensional team approach today. And I felt like Josh McDaniels was not comfortable with that. He wanted to have more balance, but simply the offensive line was kind of getting bullied, and they couldn't run the football at all today. With really the only success they had running was to the outside, and even at times that was pretty limited. So they leaned heavily on Drake May, and it shows in the numbers. I believe he actually had 46 pass attempts and compared to only 19 team rushes, which it also includes 5 Drake May runs. So 14 run plays for the running backs in today's game, as well as a wide receiver, I believe a little jet sweep to Demario Douglas. But that's not going to do it. That's absolutely just showing your hands and not being able to run the ball, especially with a young offensive line too. I'm sure you want to get them moving and have a little bit of momentum, get them settled into the game. But the Patriots were just unable to establish the running game whatsoever. And that's something that really impacted this team last year that hopefully is not going to carry over. And it's not like the Raiders have this great defensive line. Of course, they have Max Crosby, one of the best ends in football. But outside of that, it's not a huge ton of talent. Of course, they have former Patriots, Adam Butler along their defensive line, but he's more so kind of one of those interior pass rushers. And the Raiders were really relying on their linebackers, guys like Jamal Adams and Devin White, to step in these running holes, and they did a really nice job from the Raiders standpoint. But it is a very concerning sign that the Patriots really had no running game whatsoever, especially against a defensive unit that you don't expect to be extremely great against the run. But hopefully that's something that doesn't carry over from last season. And we can bring that right into our offensive line discussion here. And maybe that's to be expected with this offensive line. You expect them to be a better run blocking team on the right side with guys like Mike Onwenu and Morgan Moses compared to the left side, where you have your two rookies, that being Will Campbell and Jared Wilson. And to Will Campbell's credit, I think that he's a very good run blocker during the preseason and stuff like that. And we saw him get movement as well as Jared Wilson. But today, that simply was just not occurring. And of course, Garrett Bradbury is pretty undersized for a center. So it's not that surprising here that the Patriots weren't able to get a ton of success in terms of the ground game running in between the tackles. I think if they are going to have success in the ground game, is going to have to be running to the right side, or it's going to have to be outside running to the left side. And a lot of quick hitters, whether it's pitches, stuff like that, extended zone type handoff, stuff like that. I think that's really their only chance of success of having any type of running game in terms of running to the left side, because we saw today it simply just was not happening. And overall, I don't think that both the rookie linemen were too bad in this game. I think that Will Campbell had a very good first half. However, he had a very, very discouraging second half, especially when he wasn't even lined up against Max Crosby, and he did at times struggle in terms of pass protection. I believe he actually gave up 2 sacks on the day. One of them, I will be fair to him, it looked like it was kind of a three-step drop for Drake May, and he has to have that ball out. I believe it was actually his first sack given up, but Drake May does have to get rid of that football. However, the strip sack is just fully unacceptable. Really, it just looked like he kind of got bull rushed, and it was looking like he was kind of playing a little bit too far to the outside and allowed a little bit more of an inside drive to Drake May, which if you know anything about offensive line play, you cannot allow defenders to win on the inside because it's an easier path to the quarterback and it's a quicker path to the quarterback. So I felt like he was playing too much on the outside, which opened him up for an inside move. And of course, Drake May actually had a strip sack there. Luckily, Will Campbell was able to kind of recover it. But I think these are the type of plays that you're really going to see a lot of this season, where he's learning to harness his body against NFL competition. Of course, we know about the length of his arms, but this is something he's going to have to overcompensate in if he's going to want to have success. He's going to have to overcompensate on outside moves, which is going to leave him vulnerable to the inside. And to that, I say, hey, sometimes you're going to get beat off the edge. Just do not let them get back to the inside, because that's only going to hurt Drake May. And when you allow interior pressure, it does not allow your quarterback to step up. And when you're allowing inside pressure, like I said before, it's a quicker path to the quarterback, meaning he's not going to have as much time. In bringing things back to the quarterback here, Drake May, like I said before, he was playing on time and in rhythm in the first half. Really had a ton of success moving the ball around and spreading it out. Compared to the second half, their first drive, they're actually moving the ball pretty well. They had a couple of screen passes, nice comeback to Kayshon Boutte. Of course, Diggs had a nice little hitch route for the first down, and then Drake May was using his legs and stuff like that. Unfortunately, there was a pressure from Max Crosby that really was the turning point in this game to me, where Drake May, instead of just taking a sack or trying to throw the ball into the dirt a couple yards short of a wide receiver, tries to force a ball to Stephon Diggs over the middle of the field, and it gets intercepted. And I felt like all the momentum that the Patriots had building up in that was lost, and you really saw how turnovers in this game particularly affect momentum of a football team, because the Raiders really did not look back after that turnover. And the Patriots offense, frankly, just did not respond for the rest of the second half, whether it was through not playing discipline with having a multitude of penalties, or just not being in rhythm and really having no success playing one-dimensional. The only time they really had any success in the second half offensively was more so in garbage time. I believe there was actually a point in time where after the interception, the Patriots had 3 3-and-out drives. And I think on the day, actually starting 3 of their drives, they actually had 3 opening play penalties on 3 different drives. So the offense really did not play discipline today, which is sad to see, because Josh McDaniels' trademark has kind of been preaching to Drake May, hey, take what you're given, play with a profit, and don't take negative plays. Or when you do, don't make them worse. And at times today, we saw the good of Drake May with extending plays, but we also saw the ability to really make a bad play worse with trying to just force something in there, and we saw that with that interception. But overall, I think that the offense just played undisciplined in this second half. They do have some good things to take away from the first half, but this Patriots offense is going to have to play better. They're going to have to get the running game more involved, especially because I think that the running back position is probably their quote-unquote most talented positional group. And if they're not able to run the ball, then they're going to have to find creative ways to either get them more involved in the passing game, or this team is frankly just going to continue to struggle from an offensive standpoint. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball today, I felt like the Patriots defense played solid. There were some encouraging signs. However, there was also some discouraging signs. However, when you allow a team only 20 points in today's NFL, you should consider that self a win from a defensive side of the ball. And I was very impressed with how the Patriots played their run today. Of course, we know how the Raiders' offensive line isn't particularly great, very similar to the Patriots' offensive line, some of the lower offensive lines in the league. But just a really nice job today in bottling the run. And that's one of the bigger concerns I have with this Patriots defense, especially their front four. Of course, guys like Harold Landry and Milton Williams, they can obviously get back or get to the quarterback. But more so just in terms of defending the run. Of course, Milton Williams didn't do a ton of that in Philadelphia. So it was interesting to really see how the Patriots were able to kind of perform against this offensive line today. And I think that they passed with flying colors in terms of defending a run. However, one of the discouraging signs, I would say, from the Patriots was their ability to get pressure while only sending 4. And I understand what you're going to say. Hey, the Patriots had 4 sacks on the day, which, of course, is a lot more than they had in the majority of games last year. However, they were sending a ton of blitzes, and they had to send guys from other areas besides the defensive line to really get pressure on Geno Smith as well as the Raiders offense. And we saw different type of blitzes, exotic blitzes from guys like Carlton Davis coming on a corner blitz. You saw Jalen Hawkins, who had a very good game today, come down for a sack. You saw the linebackers really shooting off. You saw other corner blitzes, slot blitzes, stuff like that. That's something that really got into the head of Geno Smith for a while there. However, when the Raiders really more so went to max protection to pick up these blitzes, that's where this Patriots team was unable to get any types of pressure on the quarterback, and that really allowed for Geno Smith to stay back there. And when you have as much time as he did on certain plays today, of course there was big chunk plays given up. And when you see that Geno Smith threw for 362 yards, you might think, oh, they were just having a ton of success throwing the ball every time that they really dropped back. That wasn't even necessarily the case. He was 24 of 34. However, he was averaging 15 yards per pass attempt, which meant he was hitting on chunk plays whenever he was completing passes, and especially on the early downs. Even the announcers really talked about it. With the play action game, it was attacking the middle of the field, and guys like Brock Bowers, who actually went down later on in the game, so he could have even had a greater day than he did, and Jacoby Myers were really having success across the middle of the field where some of that pressure was being sent, whether it was a safety or the linebackers. But because of that, there were open spots, whether it was man or zone, and it was very difficult for this Patriots team to really get consistent stops at times when they had to keep sending pressure, and the Raiders front was really holding up, which allowed Geno Smith to really take apart this Patriots defense. But that's not to say that the defense didn't have any success at all. Like I said before, I think overall they were solid, and I thought that the secondary played really well on the day, besides a couple plays from here and there. But Alex Austin, I felt, did a real nice job kind of covering up Gonzo's absence. Of course, whether he was going up against Jacoby Myers or some of the Raiders' other wide receivers, really didn't see a ton of him on the field today. I think he actually got credited with 2 pass breakups, though, so I felt like he was playing pretty sticky coverage. Carlton Davis, overall, I thought had himself a very nice day. Of course, he undercut that ball that was intercepted, which made it a really tough play for Brock Bowers to make. And, of course, he had a couple of nice pass breakups on some 3rd and longs. However, that last deep ball, I believe it was actually to Thornton Jr. of the Raiders. You simply just cannot play that type of defense in that situation. You can't bite on a double move on 3rd and 20, and especially when you're down by 10, you can't let a guy get behind you. And I don't know what he was thinking there. Of course, he is a veteran in this league, so I think he just absolutely got fooled, and he has to have confidence in himself to step up and make a tackle, but you just can't let anyone get behind you there. So it was very interesting to see what happens with that, and I'm sure that he's going to tell you that's simply a play that he cannot allow. But overall, I thought that the secondary played really well. We saw a lot of Craig Woodson, not as much as Kyle Duggar that I thought. However, I saw him more so kind of playing some of the linebacker positions. Didn't see a ton of Del Pettis on the day. He was out there for some snaps, and I really didn't see a lot of Marte Mapu from a defensive standpoint at all. I saw him more so on special teams. But overall, I think the defense played well. Of course, Harold Landry on the day, I think he actually got credited with 2.5 sacks. Kaylavon Chason got credited with a half sack. So they did a real nice job of running some stunts, too, with guys like Milton Williams and Harold Landry, which did confuse the Raiders' offensive line. So hopefully that's something that continues to grow. But Harold Landry on the day probably was the defensive standout. did a real nice job in run support, setting the edge, but getting to the quarterback really did play well. And that's certainly something that hopefully the Patriots are going to be able to keep up, because with Gonzo back in the secondary playing tight man coverage like I expect them to, if this team is going to have success, it's going to come from that front four getting pressure. And you like to see more pressure from guys like Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. But like I said before, a very encouraging sign in the running game. I saw that Christian Barmore in particular had a couple of tackles for loss and a couple of nice run stuff, as well as Milton Williams. So if they're able to kind of combine those areas and become that two-headed monster that gets interior pressure like I expect them to, this Patriots defense is going to be very difficult to put points on. And I think that just overall, I think that this Patriots defense is going to be fine when you add Christian Gonzalez back into the mix. And moving on to the special teams today, I felt like the coverage was pretty fine. However, I do think that the Patriots were playing a little undisciplined. We had a multitude of special teams penalties. And I thought that the special teams during the preseason was a huge bright spot. And I was hoping that they would be able to carry over that type of play. And I'm sure that you were going to hear a lot from the special teams coaches that, frankly, the Patriots did not play that well, in particular on special teams on the day. Of course, there wasn't any huge turnover-worthy plays like a muff punt or something like that, but just eliminating those penalties, I think, is really going to help the Patriots out, as well as Borregales, missing that 40-yarder. That's a big-time play, very similar to last year in the home opener as well against Seattle. You make that kick, you're up 6 at that point, and you could kind of call a little bit of a different game here. But that's something to monitor as well. Of course, the different conditions here from Miami, where Borregales more so kicked compared to New England, whether it's more stormy and stuff like that, that's going to be something to monitor. It was nice to see him come out and nail that 39-yarder after that miss. But, this is something that you're going to want to monitor here, how well he's kicking at Gillette Stadium. All right, everyone, I'm sure that's not the outcome we were looking for. Of course, the Patriots starting 0-1, but I'm looking forward to breaking down more of these games for this upcoming season, and I look forward to providing you all coverage all season long. So hopefully I'll check you all out in the next one, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.